Welcome to It's a Controls Problem, where we do precision guesswork based upon unreliable data given to us by those of questionable knowledge. I'm your host, Charles Johnson. All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of It's a Controls Problem. I am your host, Charles Johnson. I'm here with my best buddy in the whole wide world, Matthew. How are you?
I'm on mute. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
That's great. No, I am just lovely. But we have a very special group here today, the automation ladies. So I will actually just go ahead and let you three introduce yourself in no particular order. Alicia, do you want to go first?
Actually, can Nikki go first?
Sure. All right. Okay. All right. I meant Nikki. Nikki, can you?
Hi, and I'm your host of the Automation Ladies, Nikki Gonzales, and those are my great friends below me, Allie and Courtney. No, you can see the dynamic, right? My name is Nikki Gonzales. I am a sales engineer by trade. I've dabbled in a lot of different things, adjacent to the industry, in the industry, supporting the industry. I currently work for an HMI manufacturer called WineTech or WinTech, depending on who you are, what you like to say. And I am co-host, I guess, it was my brainchild to start a podcast called Automation Ladies after I listened to an episode of a podcast called Office Ladies, which is Angela and Pam from The Office, who are best friends in real life, and they like to get together and talk about their common interest, being on The Office. So if that can tell you anything about the premise of our show, it's some ladies that are friends and like to talk about nerdy stuff like industrial automation.
All right. Well, welcome all to the show. Courtney and Alicia, do you have anything else to add here, or do you want to just continue to go?
No. So I'm Allie Gilpin. I go by Allie Gilpin.
Okay.
I am a chemical engineer by education, and I turned into a controls engineer later in my career after being a process engineer. And then I started my own controls consulting firm. And I've since moved to Houston, and then now I'm in Louisiana on the Bayou. And I have we have a conference that Automation Ladies puts on called OT SCADA CON. And I'm working mostly on that these days, and backed off a little bit from the control stuff. And we have our third bestie, Courtney, and she can tell you about herself.
Well, Courtney, go ahead.
I'm the robot nerd of the group. I've been little over 20 years as an electrical engineer, just broadly, with little under 15 of that being in, specifically in robotics or controls. I do controls, but I'm not going to claim to be great at it. I can make things talk to robots, and I'm good at cameras as well. But generally speaking, I just like making all the things talk to each other, mostly cameras to robots and making robots do stuff. And I've done that most of my life.
I will say there's a lot of brain power here in this podcast today. I don't know if we've ever had this much brain power here before. So no, welcome. And I love the fact that you all each bring a unique perspective into this. So you three built an incredible brand around the Automation Ladies identity. And so before you were a team, what was that first light bulb moment where you realized that like automation just wasn't a job, but a calling?
I can jump into that at least. For me, I left and I couldn't help but come back. I didn't necessarily plan for it. I kind of veered into, after I worked in machine vision and then pneumatics and motion, and then I went into simulation. So design of products for manufacturability and optimization and things like that. And then I ended up doing also, working in the supply chain. And I didn't necessarily think that I would come back to industrial automation. in a hardware sense at any point. I lived in the Bay Area, and kind of software eats the world over there. And but I really missed things that move around and make things and make noise. And I made a pretty terrible business case to go to PAC Expo one year when I worked for an enterprise AI analytics company, just because I wanted to go and see stuff. And then, when I had kind of a natural transition I needed to make after so many years doing other things, I just got pulled back into the industry, and I missed it, and I missed the people. So at that point, I think is when I realized like this wasn't just something that I kind of lucked into, and it was the career that because I've never really known what I wanted to do. I got a business degree actually, and then ended up in technical roles because I do think a lot like an engineer. But the fact that industrial automation wasn't something I knew about until I really ended up here. And it took me leaving to realize that this is actually where I do want to choose to be if I have a choice.
Any of the other ladies want to add anything to that?
I decided there was a big layoff, and I was looking for work, and I found a systems integration firm. And but before that, I had once been part of a greenfield build, and I was in charge of, like, as a process engineer, I was in charge of the controls, the systems integrators, and then the electrical contractors too. And so I would have to, get them to talk to each other and put in, all the equipment that I was helping buy. And at one point we had a loop check, and a maintenance electrician kind of just like rolled his eyes at me when I asked what the green ones were for, talking about like green terminal blocks. And I had no idea, why there were even colors in there. And so he rolled his eyes, and that kind of was like a moment for me where I was like, this is the last piece of, engineering that's in my way. In terms of, if I buy a valve, I can't tell the valve what percentage to open without a controls engineer in the way. And so I guess went over to the dark side, and I consider that just getting that last piece out of the way so that I could, fully have all the control that I wanted. So true control freak.
I understand. And the funny thing, saying the dark side, and we see Matthew here with the Star Wars shirt on today. So, well, Courtney, how about you?
So that first few years of electrical engineering I described were actually in embedded systems and like PCB design. And I was just, so mediocre at that stuff. And it didn't spark any passion in me like the way moving machinery does. And I ended up moving. I lived in Silicon Valley when I was doing this. And I moved to SoCal to chase a boy and a bunch of other stuff. I don't always, it's far enough in my past now that I don't mind telling the real story, but I arrived in SoCal with felonies and 6 years of experience as an engineer, but nobody would hire me because I couldn't finish a background check. And I will say that in automation and like manufacturing, I personally feel that there's a higher chance of getting hired despite things being on your record or getting to break in and kind of start some things over again. But I had a lot of skills, just couldn't clear a background check. So I jumped in again as an electrical technician and worked my way back up to engineer after I expunged all of my mistakes. But I know there's other people that have found similar paths out of engineering and then back in due to the same type of meandering paths.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point that you bring up. There are a lot of people in controls that have a not so clean past. And they find their way in, and a lot of companies will just be like, okay, well, we just can't send you there. We could send you everywhere else, but right here you can't really go there. So no, I actually I really like all of your stories. I thought they were I think they're all very interesting and unique. So this question is for Allie. So with your deep knowledge in the industrial space, like, what was the most intimidating hurdle you had to clear when you first started poking the box of complex systems?
I think when I had first got my first controls job was commissioning and starting stuff up and like doing code from scratch. But it wasn't until I switched over, because I was from like the process side of things, until I switched over to machines, and I took over a UL shop. And I think that was, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. But then once I was able to see that, yeah, you can make 13 machines talk to each other, but all they're really looking at is like the in-feed sensor and the out-feed sensor. They're not really talking to each other. They're barely talking to each other. Once I figured that out, I was just like, oh man, like I thought, this was going to be a lot more involved. I think that was my light bulb moment where I was just like, you know what, I think I can do this. And the guy that was before me, he was doing everything. So he was designing the control panels, and then programming them and then starting them up. And so when I took that over, I took over the additional responsibilities of dealing with UL. And so, yeah, I think that was my biggest. And then we were also doing some stuff that was still process heavy, because it was a heating bath for aerosol cans. And so that's still, that's the most thermodynamics they're really going to look at in terms of that type of machinery. Is not normally looking at temperatures and pressures, except for this can bath. And the customer basically said that they'd never seen a machine shop that could do PNIDs and energy balances. And that's because that's the world that I came from. But yeah, that was my big aha moment, was getting all these machines to talk to each other, but really they were just looking at in-feed and out-feed sensors to start and stop them.
Yeah, it's funny. Sometimes when I joke about people and controls, I'm like, look, it's just inputs and outputs. You take the inputs and make the outputs go on. It's not that hard. But a lot of people realize that it can get really in depth. So, Courtney, you often bring like a very practical and uh, grounded perspective to the table. So, like, what was your first system that you worked on where you thought like there has to be a more efficient way to do this?
Um, I think in situations where we have like the what you don't want in robotics, which is like high mix, low volume. I was looking at ways to know like what is the thing I'm actually looking at, and there is almost always a more efficient way to change tools or change programs on the fly. But the solution, really simply, when you step back and look at it, was change over less. Um, and ultimately, that was what we got implemented over the course of, I'm not sure how long, but like we had to change over frequently because we wanted to do this on the fly. What am I looking at? I need to identify it. And then somewhere before this process, it was, let's not do that at all. Let's run one batch at a time instead of trying to run everything. So I think sometimes when you're looking right at the problem in front of you, the most efficient thing you can do is actually take a few steps back from that process and see what's making it inefficient. Because a lot of times you're already too late. Like wherever you are, if there's like a 6-step process and you're seeing a bottleneck or you're trying to address something at step 6, you probably got problems back at step 3 and 4 that you can look at and make better. So looking at things as a like not just the one problem in front of you, but like as the whole system of problems in front of you.
Yeah, that's also a really good point. I'll tell you, I'm actually in all of each of you, and what you bring in your level of knowledge. Because I'll tell you, I know nothing about robots at all. No, know nothing about that whatsoever. And at least the industrial side, I would dabble in it every once in a while, but never anything full on. And so, Nikki, you've seen the industry from so many angles, from the sales to tech and community building. And so, how did those early roles shape your approach to learning the technical side?
Well, I got lucky, I guess. The first job I did have was as a machine vision sales engineer for Kiats, and they hire right out of college, and they have really good programs. And they hire at the time anyway. I don't know if they've changed this, but they didn't care what degree you had as long as you had a degree and you fulfilled their requirements and were willing to take their tests and do demos of products and things like that in the interview process. And so I found somebody that was willing to teach me an entire technology and an industry that I didn't know existed before I applied for the job, which was really cool. And I did used to work for my dad's company. And so I did a lot of technical marketing, technical writing, user manual writing, things like that, including for kind of an HMI at the time. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was learning a lot. And so I realized I really liked technical problem solving and explaining how maybe a complex solution to somebody that hasn't used it before can just be used to solve their problem. And Kians was great because I got to go inside of any factory that would have me, basically, with my demo kit of a camera and lenses and lights. And I got to test out all kinds of different applications. I got to do line walks. I got to look at how something was made. And then typically look at some areas of that had issues where maybe a human operator was not able to catch certain types of defects, or they had particular problems that they wanted to prevent. And then I would get to test those. I would get to test them in my lab. I would get to test them on the line. I had to basically program a system for a unique application for every customer that I got to help. And so I got an incredible education by sort of doing the application engineering up front of everything that I sold. And then I was also the technical support afterwards. So if something didn't quite go right, or the customer didn't know how to use it, or the operator wasn't well trained, I would be the one that got called to go fix it. And so it really gave me kind of a end-to-end kind of look at what it means to sell a technical solution. And then also how valuable it is to be the subject matter expert in a technology that your customer doesn't have time to master because they only need it for a small portion of their job. But to me, that was my whole job. And I really loved getting to become that expert. And machine vision was fairly new at the time. It was still very complex. It was very, the answer, it depends on what you're trying to do. The lighting, everything is variable. And so it was a very fun sort of systems thinking, problem solving puzzle that I got to do all the time. And I am naturally curious. I have ADHD, and this really triggers my problem solving cortisol release. So it's something that I can hyper focus in on and really get some enjoyment out of. What I did find, though, is that eventually, once machine vision was kind of not new to me anymore, not as novel, I started looking further up the line or down the line and starting to cut. When I find a bad product, what do? We kick it out, right? We need logic to do that. And then do we talk to a PLC? We talk to some pneumatics. What do we use? How does that work? And then, how do we, like Courtney said, if you're having a problem, especially if you're having a quality problem being caught by vision, and you're not just looking at trending, you actually kicked out a part, you've got a problem way up the line, right? Causing that drift or that change or that error. And so it just...
They hate quality inspection. We just like shine light on it.
yeah, exactly. So I think in that sense, I was really lucky to have that field experience across all different types of industries. And then that's always kind of informed how I do things in the next roles I've had. And a lot of people, a lot of my career doesn't necessarily make linear sense. But for me, I kind of jumped to like the next logical place that I found an opportunity where something that I learned in the past can inform me, but also I can learn something new.
I really like the idea of supporting what you sold, and so seeing it literally from beginning to end is a very rewarding feeling when you do that, and it gives you a new level of perspective. Like, okay, well, I sold this, and now, like, is it practical? Does it work? Okay, well, what are the things that we can do to make it work? And sometimes some people don't ever get that real experience to have it from start to finish. And it is very super rewarding to have
very
that. So I
rewarding
think
and
that's
also
awesome.
very stressful. I will say I had a lot of anxiety those years. And I specifically also told my HR department that I might like to move to a division that was a little bit less reinventing the wheel for every application, because the part that I struggled with a lot was balancing the support, the inclination to want to support everything and everyone, right? Do trainings, answer every service call, quickly solve every problem, with the fact that I was only judged on my sales goal.
Yeah, that's a real feel bad too.
It did become like very stressful for me, because as I got more customers that I was supporting, the support load got heavier, and at the same time I had to sell more. And I'm not a person that can like cut corners and sleep well at night, so it did become, kind of a heavy load eventually. And I think, but I don't know. I think that's kind of a universal thing in our industry. Like most of these jobs, they come with a lot of rewards, but it's not a a coasty type of situation, right? We really
Yeah.
work for that.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when you're, I'll go out to customer sites who are newer to our product, and they go out, and sometimes it's a matter of their perception of what they actually had versus what they were expecting. And so then sometimes, like, when you break out that knowledge to them, like, hey, yeah, I know that you were expecting that, but you also have to take this into consideration. And then they're just like, well, that's not what we were. I'm like, okay, look, I'm just telling you, this is how you have to look at it. Not like I need to change your perspective on what you thought that this was. And then once you get around, that kind of thing, then it becomes a lot easier. But sometimes explaining that is tough, or getting them to understand that is really tough. Um, I do have a question for the group now. You know, in an industry that can feel like a boys' club, how did you each find each other, and how did that support system change the trajectory of your careers?
Great question. Does anybody want to take that before I jump in?
It's the pandemic really changed how we interact with the world, I think, and drove a lot of us more onto LinkedIn than we were before. At least that's for me. I had like maybe 100 friends on LinkedIn, and I barely used it. And then I found myself wanting to connect more with people, because even though I was an essential worker and going out and like doing my life, everybody disappeared from my life. Like everybody went into their caves, and I was like, I need human interaction. And when I was on LinkedIn, I actually started seeing Allie building her turbo encabulator. And that was fascinating to me, because I didn't know that many people that even knew that joke from Rockwell from I don't know how long ago.
Oh yeah, that's it.
I was following her building this thing, and I was like, hey, that's cool. And then a group chat started on LinkedIn with women in automation. And we started like a weekly Saturday phone call where mostly it was Allie and Nikki that would show up.
Well, it was alternating days. We never met each other there.
Yeah, that's true. We never actually physically met.
No, I mean, we never made it to the same Saturday call.
23 or 22?
It was.
I don't remember which Automate, but it was like Automate 22 or 23 was like the first trade show that we went to, and we were all going to the show because like the world was kind of alive again. It must have been 22, because I was with Universal Robots at the time. I didn't even been, it had to be right around that time. But it was definitely an Automate, and I remember being with UR at the time, and that was my version of it. But like Nikki and Allie have their own versions of it. They ended up in the chat as well.
Yeah, Allie, you can tell it, Nikki. No, I was gonna say you tell it.
Okay. I mean, we all have our own ways, right? So I also found Allie on LinkedIn. I remember her posting from Pack Expo, and I had just had 2 babies and had been working from home in COVID, and I was like intellectually starved, and I wanted to see more of the stuff. So same thing, came back onto LinkedIn, hadn't been there in a long time. Didn't expect the kind of content that I was seeing, which was great. And yeah, I started messaging Allie. I think I sent her something, like some wire or something for her turbo encabulator, because I also thought that was super cool. And the group chat led to the Saturday call. And like I said, the Saturday call, I made it on a few times. Allie made it on a few times, but we never made it on this at the same time. So we didn't actually talk there ever. And I asked Allie to do a podcast with me before we had ever had an in-person conversation, like not even a virtual in-person conversation. I think we had just messaged each other on LinkedIn. But I will say, in high school, I didn't particularly fit in real well with the girls. And I ended up taking an AP physics, and I was the only girl in the class. And I used to play cards with the guys at lunch. And it was just like an environment that I felt more comfortable in. It seemed more straightforward and less drama and things that I didn't understand. And so I was pretty used to being one of a few women, and it didn't really bother me. And in fact, I kind of felt more uncomfortable in full-on like women-led situations where there was like groups of only women, or like I felt a little out of place. And so it wasn't something that I was seeking out, like, oh, I need a women's support group. It was just that when I saw them on LinkedIn, I genuinely was interested in what they were talking about. And then I realized it actually is really cool and very helpful to have women that you can talk to in the industry. That can be friends, or we can have these, friendly conversations about the nerdy things we are interested in for work. But I really didn't know that I was missing it until I found it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Makes perfect sense. Allie, do you want to add to it, or are you good?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much what happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, Allie, you're so cool. We want to talk to you. And see
What are you building, Allie?
I will tell you, I remember seeing that someone had actually put it on a VHS tape, and we would play it. I don't know, this is like 2007, 2008. And we would have it as part of our training. And so someone's like, wow, retro encabulator by Rockwell Automation. And like, they're just like writing everything. They're like, yeah, so where do we find that stuff? And I was like, what are you talking about? And they're like,
Oh my God.
well, yeah, from the I'm like, bro, that doesn't even exist. And they're like, what? And I'm like,
Flux capacitor.
So can I go on a tangent and tell a story here?
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so back in my days of machine vision, I used to. So I worked in Silicon Valley, and as well as like the Valley of Northern California. So agriculture, but also like the smartest people doing R&D on all kinds of technology, right? So solar was real big at the time, and there was all kinds of companies developing new types of thin film solar cells, and they had all these novel problems that they wanted to solve, and I would get called in there and try to solve them. And half the time, I couldn't solve them. They were not solvable with the technology that we had, but I tried. And so I would do a lot of testing, and I basically wrote up like a white paper on some of these applications because they were not commonly done, and I wasn't replicating something that we had in the catalog. And I had a sales guy from the Midwest come do a ride along with me one day because they were starting to build some of these solar factories in the Midwest to produce the technology that was being developed in the Bay Area. And he was like, yeah, we're starting to get solar applications, and I want to come and see like what this industry is like and come ride along with you. And at the end of the day, we had a conversation, and he was just like, this is so hard. Like, I can't believe how you do this. These people are so smart. And like, they were just, a lot of the customers, they really want to make you know how smart they are and how much smarter they are than you are. And you really have to prove yourself. And I was like, I hadn't thought about that. But he goes, yeah, all I have to do is like point to the thing in the catalog. And then sometimes if I don't know what to say, I'll just make something up, and it doesn't matter because I just use big words and people don't know what they are. And so he's like, one time there was this, I went in and looked at a system, and there was some pink haze stuff happening on the screen. And I just told the guy that it was the olfactory refraction index of the lens. And and he was like, he just looked at me like, well, he would have known anyway what I was talking about, whether I said the right thing or the wrong thing. And it just, it made me laugh a little bit because it does entirely depend on your audience, like whether or not the words that actually mean anything make any sense or not. And that's one of the reasons I appreciate having these friends so much, because I could say this to my friends and family and they would look at me like, so? I don't know what that is. Like, what's that matter? But I get a laugh out of you guys.
Wow,
If
I've
somebody
never.
develops an olfactory sensor system or a vision system at some point, please do call me. I think that would be hilarious.
I mean, you just follow your nose at that point. Like, just wow, like toucan. Oh, wow. Okay. You know, I've never done anything like that. I mean, sometimes I'll sit there and I've explained something, and then usually when they don't believe me, I just let it go by for 6 months because I know it's going to come back around and be like, "Hey, remember when I said that this was the problem? Yeah, well, that is the actual problem. I wasn't trying to, foreshadow. Well, Charles, what do you think the problem is? This. No, no, it can't be. That's so out of left field that it can't be right. Okay, cool. Then 6 months later, hey Charles, we got a problem. Yeah, is it this one? Yeah, how'd you know? Because we talked about that before, and here's what you need to do. Oh, well, that works. Imagine that. Um, wow. Oh, oh my God, that's great. That's
The
great.
worst thing as a young engineer, at least, I think, is feeling like you don't know what someone's talking about,
Yeah.
and they'll sooner like thing and Google it later than try to challenge you on it. That's honestly hilarious. I've got to put that in my toolbox for the next challenging person.
I worked with a young person who started the car with the garage closed. And we were getting ready to go to a job site. I'm like, hey, you ready? He's like, man, I screwed up. He's like, I started the car. It's running in the garage, but all the carbon monoxide. I was like, did you open the garage door? No, I can't because of the carbon monoxide. I'm like, from the outside. So then, literally, like he sat there for like 20 minutes, like, and I walked out back, just opened the button, and I said, okay, we'll let it clear out, then we will drive out. I'm like, well, what are you going to do about the garage door? I'm like, we're just going to leave it open for a while. And so then, like, on the way to the data center, I was like, now, why, in any, without any thought, why didn't you even think of opening the garage door at all? And then you panicked and then shut the other door, which could bring carbon monoxide into the house anyway. So, okay. Um, yeah, but I don't know of a story that tops what you just said. So that one right there. Oh, that is great. Um, Allie, let's go ahead and ask you a question here. If you could go back and give your day one self a piece of advice about navigating the technical complexities of industrial controls, what would it be?
It's gonna be okay. I think I spent too much time panicking. And I think that kind of like led to earlier burnout. Um, and I think, yeah. Um, I think in the beginning, you don't know what you don't know. So you don't have that confidence. But eventually you just keep solving things and you just keep solving things. And eventually, you just trust yourself. And so I would say slow down but it's going to be okay.
That's
That's what I would tell myself.
that's a really good one. Yeah, people just don't. You don't understand when you go in, especially when you don't have the background. I tell people if you aren't breaking anything, you aren't doing anything. It really is. It's really one of those where you are going to make mistakes. You're not going to. You are going to swing and miss a lot. But what you have to be able to do is be resilient enough to understand that these mistakes are going to happen and that you move forward and continue to improve yourself. So, Courtney, what is one rookie mistake that you made early on that actually ended up being your greatest lesson in how systems function?
Ooh, when I have to rank something, that's when like all the occurrences disappear from my brain. So I think my biggest rookie mistake, or my most headache rookie mistake, was thinking that I could do a 2 robot system with no PLC, because both of the robots were smart. Um, And I ultimately, like, I did make that system work, but it was so much harder than it had to be. Because what I learned from that was all of the devices in a cell, especially the cell that I was working with, a PLC, a camera, a robot, barcode scanner, all of these things are smart enough to make decisions on their own, and they shouldn't. All of them should be reduced to basically a dumb muscle and let the brain tell the muscles what to do. So the robot arm should be a big muscular arm. The camera should just be eyeballs, and the brain should be telling things what to do. So I tried to make every single thing like a smart thing. And then they're all just basically, the way my mentor, Greg McIntyre, described it was it's a whole bunch of camps shooting arrows at each other with messages tied to them. And they're like colliding midair and not reaching the destinations. And it was a huge nightmare. So that was, I don't want to say overconfident, but I thought I could shortcut some stuff out and take out a piece of hardware. And I just added like 1,000 hours of labor.
As an aside, sometimes at night I doom scroll TikTok, and one just came across because we're talking about robots. I guess somewhere over in Asia, they're in like a I guess a kickboxing ring, and so he's got two robots, and I guess they fight, or I guess they're training. So one of them starts approaching, I guess the trainer instructor, and like he just pushes it away. Like, no, you need to go this way. And then like you watch the robot kind of like all of a sudden like turn to him, like think like that's real disrespectful, and like go up and like try to like start like punching him. And then like he just turns around like, what are you doing? Like, go away. And like the robot kept just like trying to go at him. And like that's what I'm kind of imagining right now. I couldn't imagine what it would take to bring all of that together. But I think a good that's a good way to talk about it. If you have all these parts and pieces and they're all trying to talk at the same time, it makes it very difficult for them to be coordinated with one another. So I think that's a good one. So Nikki, for those listening who feel stuck in a silo, like what was the catalyst that pushed you to start sharing your journey publicly?
Probably Allie. So, like, getting to know Allie over LinkedIn before I actually knew her, she wrote a LinkedIn article that just was called like the story of Allie G and PCE or something of that nature. And it kind of chronicled how she got to be a controls engineer and started her own company. And there's a picture of her in a purple raincoat on as the accompanying picture to that article, which ended up being her cover photo of the podcast for the first couple seasons. Because I mocked something up using what I could find on the internet, and then she pushed it out into the world like it was a finished thing. But yeah, no, I read that, and I felt like, I don't know, I've never made friends on the internet before. That's weird. But I felt like the combination of watching her content, talking to her through the chat, seeing what she was working on, and then like reading her history made me feel like I kind of knew who she was. We had a lot of things in common. I was interested in talking to her. And so I just thought, well, I guess at that point also I had gone through enough stuff in my life to realize that like I don't have the patience to be around people that I don't appreciate anymore. I used to have to, smile and nod in sales meetings with people I really wouldn't want to spend time with otherwise. And I'd kind of gotten to this point where I was like, you know what, I'm not doing it anymore. I had worked for myself. I had, taken risks. I'd lost things. And I was like, it's not even that bad if you lose something. Like you lose a job or you lose a property or you lose, you have a miscarriage, whatever. Like you gain some resilience. And so I realized that I would rather just put myself out there, and then people can happily self-select not to talk to me or do business with me if they really don't like what I'm about. And I think that ultimately saves us a lot of headache of trying to force things. I really don't want to spend time interacting with people that would criticize me or whatever. So I kind of lost that like feeling that I had to be something specific. And it was really freeing. And then just like when I realized I didn't have to wear makeup, like it's great to have the choice as a woman to be able to do stuff. And I respect women that do it. And I think it looks awesome. I just realized at some point that it wasn't a hard requirement, and like, man, life got a lot easier. And I feel like just like the girl said earlier, like Allie said, you know, be easier on yourself. It's going to be okay. I think we all, you know, come into this industry, we learn a lot of things the hard way. And then once you realize it doesn't have to be that hard, you're like, man, I hope that some of these other folks can figure this out earlier than I can. And yeah, it's been great. I think, honestly, the more people I interact with that already know stuff about me, it's a very different kind of working relationship. It's really nice.
It's so hard to make friends when you're an adult. Like kids are just like, "Do you want to be my friend?" Okay, and then like you just go off and play together. But then like adults, like we have to talk to one another. It's like it's hard. It's hard enough that like I told Nikki before, you know, I'm a people person, but I hate people. If that makes sense, and
Yep.
you know, people are like, yeah, they're like, well, you're personable. I'm like, it doesn't mean I like you. Like, I have to interact with you. Now, admittedly, you know, when I teach and whatnot, you know, I really do like all the students that come in because they offer a unique experience coming in, and it always helps me adjust my, you know, my training techniques to try to catch, you know, the majority of everything. But like actually like having friends, meaning like trying to talk to someone consistently that isn't like a like that isn't a coworker. You're like, I have to effort. Like it's like I have my phone. Oh, I have to. You know what? I have to type. I don't. You know what? I'm just not going to do that. I'll send them. I'll send them a TikTok. There we go. That's the communication. Like I'll just send that for them for a while. It is. It's so hard. Oh, I have a ton of memes about AI all the time that I send to people, or things just from my personal experience, like where I learned JavaScript in 30 days to take to become a front end developer. You know, like there's a brain that goes like, haha, that idiot. And I'm like, yep, that was me. Like I remember that one. But let's get back on track. Sorry, I sometimes I see shiny objects and just go a different way. But for the group, you know, we often see projects that stall out because the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing during the design phase. So, like, how do we get stakeholders from owners to engineers to actually kind of speak the same language early on, so we aren't constantly course correcting mid install?
Involve the operators.
Yeah, in the beginning.
The last person that's going to push the buttons on this thing is like the most valuable person in the room that's never in the room.
That's true. That's so true.
I see that all the time. The people that know the most aren't even invited into these like boardrooms with the pizza. Be like, seriously? Like they how? I just went and talked to them, and you know, maybe it was in Spanish, but you know, I don't know. I think that we're definitely not involving it. The companies that I see succeed, companies like Procter and Gamble, they're the ones who bring their operators to FATs and fly them all the way there, so that they can do factory acceptance tests. So yeah, if you're not, are you really involving everyone that's supposed to be involved? And you know, if it's production that's already happening, you may not want to because you're worried about production. So you have to have them out there producing. But I mean, it's really important to get them in the planning and or any kind of, you know, if safety occurrences happen, like why are they not part of the HAZOP or part of the FMEA or part of any kind of analysis that's going on? Safety risk assessments. Yeah, when systems are looked at, why is the operator not there? Is a huge one.
Coming from having been an OEM and gone off to commission a machine in another state and then come back to visit it 3 months later to look at it, and the operators knew my HMI and my machine better than me. Like I'm trying to fumble my way through a menu I wrote 3 months ago and forgot, and they're just like, oh no, boop, 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 boop. So like they will become the experts on whatever gets designed.
I have a little bit different just experience, but I would say also don't design for the least or for the minimum amount of capability that you need now. Like if you can at all, without incurring too much cost, leave a little flexibility, leave a little room for additional connections, additional logic, additional functionality that maybe your customer didn't ask for, or try to use things that are modular enough or are expandable enough that you don't end up in a really hard to design out of situation once scope change happens. Because let's face it, even if you have everyone involved, sometimes it does happen, right? The other thing is I think, we're just as human beings are kind of wired to not want to talk about what we don't know. And so I feel like during a lot of these conversations at the beginning when things are getting spec'd or whatever, there's sometimes stuff that gets left out because somebody doesn't know. And rather than bring it up as a point that they don't know and it needs to be found out, it just kind of gets left out until it gets found out the hard way that somebody didn't know.
Yeah. Those are all very, those are all very good points. It is true that the end user themselves are usually not brought in. And then when it comes to that, it just, they're like, well, that's not really what I wanted. Or, Nikki, as even you just said that, program a little flexibility. For example, one thing that I would always do, and now a lot of people used to say I would program to launch rockets, but mine was, I'm like, well, where you see that, mine is more flexibility. So I had a lot of choices where a customer could just select at any point in time what they wanted, or a combination of all of that for the sequence that they need. And so, like, for me, it didn't really add anything at all because I already had it built here, so I just added it here. And I'm like, well, all right. I'm like, the customer can just keep it this way and that's it. But now we don't have to go back and do this because now the customer with just a click of a button can just switch it. I think I think it's a very underutilized thought process that doesn't happen a lot. Like, and I think there's a fine line too that you have to draw because like a painter, you could always go a little more and a little more and a little more, and then you're like, how, like, when do you actually like stop, go come back just a little bit, like it's hard to, oh, look at the little kitty cat. As buildings move towards being more responsive and interconnected, they start to resemble complex industrial plants. And so, what is the biggest lesson the industrial sector can take from the flexibility and, let's say, occupant focused nature from modern building controls and vice versa?
Answer to that first question, like what can industrial really like maybe take away from or learn from commercial on that side of things? Because I think a lot of the heavy industrial stuff that I'm on, like they care about energy management, but really they're just watching for too much current on something to be overloaded and die, versus we're just spending a lot of money on energy inefficiently. And I think that could be done better because engineers know how to monitor, currents and the temperature of devices and all that in much the same way. But I don't think it's prioritized the same way.
Yeah, I mean, some cases people care about more reliability over efficiency. In some cases, I don't know how much load shedding the industrial sector does.
If you were actually monitoring energy intelligently, you could modify your operations a little bit.
The energy efficiency, the cooling efficiency, right? The water usage, greener behind the meter power generation technology. Because right now the data centers are willing to pay for it because they need capacity and they need to be able to build, and they can't get on the grid everywhere.
And they can get CapEx now.
They can. Exactly. Which is why a lot of industrial companies, if they're already running, for instance, depending on how much the cost of their production or downtime is, prioritizing something like an energy management program may not be in their budget allocation, because either it's too small of a drop in the bucket compared to their overall operation, or B, it's just not a priority when you have a lot of companies kind of running on avoiding downtime or reacting to downtime and trying to keep production up and trying to keep numbers up, and then
stay lean.
Exactly. Then longer term, or let more indirect projects, like an energy management program. Same thing goes for like, compressed air, for instance, is used in so many facilities. And not a lot of them do any optimization to make sure that they're not using way too much, and that their compressors, are right sized and they're efficient and, that sort of stuff. Because that's not the primary purpose of their business, right? And the automation engineers that work there, that's not the primary purpose of their business either. Which is on kind of the point that you made earlier. It's like, oh crap, we got a requirement now, we got to talk to something and it doesn't have the right protocol. If that support's already built into the devices that you're using and you don't have to pay for another driver or another protocol gateway or another piece of hardware to talk to it, then it's not as big of a deal to have to add that capability. Just like you need to be able to, pop on some more I/O or something if you need to, or add a sensor that you didn't think of.
Yeah. I mean, those are, and those are things that you see in the building automation side too, like field servers, they're like protocol converters. I mean, Niagara does it as well. The Jace can take a proprietary protocol, convert it to BACnet, Modbus, OPC, even MQTT, which is becoming really popular on our side now. Though I'm still not a MQTT. Well, that's a whole other discussion about how I feel about MQTT. You have OT SCADA CON, and so what was the driving force behind creating that specific format, and how does that bridge the gap for professionals who feel kind of stuck between IT and OT worlds?
The driving force was a class called Traceroute Con, which was about industrial networking, and he brought into a room, I don't know how many people were there, maybe 30, just, people. And I could just feel the brain power in that room. And I wanted another way to do that. But, and so, that's kind of how OT SCADA CON was born, with the idea that like, I can't pay attention to something for more than 30 minutes. So all these sections for OT SCADA CON are 30-minute sections. So you can't go too deep, but the idea is that you can get just enough of a nugget of information that could make you want to pursue like knowing people that know that stuff. And for you to start on your journey of trying to know, a different avenue or a different part of the world of SCADA, because SCADA can be used with, robotics, but it can be used with process control. We were talking earlier about the overlap. The biggest overlap I know of is utilities and air handlers, which use utilities. So using steam or using cold water to do air handling is, there's a lot of process control stuff that air handlers do the exact same thing, where you have a PID loop and you're doing temperature control or you're doing humidity control or pressure control or flow control. But anyway, you may be from one end or the other. So you may only know process control. That's where, I only know process control. I've never done a successful project with robotics, whereas Courtney has done robotics. And so there's a section on machine vision. There's sections on machine safety. There's sections on OT cybersecurity, and digital transformation. And so that's why it is actually for people if you come from the IT side and you're just breaking into the OT side. This is actually a really good way to bridge that gap and to know who to talk to and to just learn a little bit about, the common language that's being used by the OT folks.
Yeah, it was kind of a combination of a training class. So Traceroute Con it was a training class that Josh, the practitioner, puts on normally at customer sites. But he had enough interest in people that were in small companies or one or two engineers that they couldn't bring a training on site. So he made a training on location. And so that group of people, they were a lot of very smart business owners and engineers that wanted to learn more about OT networks, but all had different expertise in different things as well. And so bringing those people together and the size of it, being able to learn and then go have lunch and network and learn from these other folks too that were at the conference or at the training. That, but on a slightly wider scale, right? So rather than it being only about OT networking, let's cover a variety of topics under the umbrella of SCADA, and then make it small enough that the speakers are also the attendees. Everybody sits in the same room. Everybody looks, it participates in every session, and everybody participates in the Q&A. And so what we found the first year is a lot of the learning wasn't just from the speakers, but it was from the people pitching in the Q&A, because a lot of the people in the audience are actually also experts at some of the things that are being talked about, and then completely new to some of the things that are being talked about. So everybody kind of gets a chance to contribute something and then also learn something at the same time. And then the idea is that it's small enough and in kind of a training class setting rather than a big conference. So you can actually walk away with a relatively good connection to a number of people that you spent 2 or 3 days in a chair next to learning with, rather than just walking in and out of sessions.
Yeah, being in an environment with like-minded people, I think that's where people really shine. First, I really want to thank all three of you for coming on here. I know that it took a lot to get everyone here, and we feel very special for all three of you gracing us with your appearance tonight. You ladies have a great night. All right, everyone, that's all we have for this episode. Remember to stay curious and always invite your operator. Until next time, I'm Charles.
And I'm Matthew.
And this has been It's a Controls Problem.
Hey Controls fans, Matthew here. Charles and I have recently formed the Logic Link Collective with our friends over at Stacks and Jewels in order to get the word out about the current knowledge gap and how their team is working to solve it. Good controls techs are hard to find, but Stacks and Jewels is building them from the ground up. 14 weeks of hands-on training on real equipment results in graduates who actually understand the ecosystem of a building. They are doing the heavy lifting, but they need the industry to meet them halfway. You can contribute financially to support their mission, or you can give your time as a mentor or technical advisor. If you're hiring, stop looking for unicorns and start looking at Stacks and Jewels graduates. Everything you need to get in touch is in the show notes. Let's support the people who are actually solving our industry's biggest problems. As always, thanks for listening.
Oh, wow.